Now I knew that 2024 was gonna be pretty difficult, and I was buckled in, ready to go, and right off the bat, in February, I received this. And it says, final balance due reminder, notice of intent to seize your property. Amount due immediately, $43,386.27. Yeah, I was pretty stressed out. You know, I've been able to handle things quite well and with grace, and normally I'm permanently unbothered. It's just how I live, it's how I operate. You know, I really don't let much of anything bother me, really ever. And this bothered me. To think that my house was at stake, and that really made me realize the jeopardy of the situation that I was in. It was no longer fun and games. It was no longer about making content and documenting and all of those things. However, I wasn't gonna go back on my word, and I actually chose to share this publicly. Payment due immediately, $3,000. This is them basically threatening to cancel my payment agreement with them. What's with all the extra paper, man? I don't need all this. Total amount due, $2,171. Amount past due, $42,171.95. We recently contacted you about your past due 2022 taxes. You must pay your balance by January 1st. Yeah, that's 4 days ago. Out of all the content that I made, that was the one video that got the most attention, of course. And essentially, an important detail about this is that I had 30 days to essentially pay this off. Well, actually, when I received it, I believe I had 60 days, but I didn't know what to do. I didn't have a, magical financial advisor that earlier in the year that could help me. Really, I didn't know anybody who could give me any advice. And even the people who could give me advice, I was kind of too far down Schitt's Creek without a paddle. I just kind of froze in many ways. And I was like, all right, let me put my head down and just get back to work and just do everything I can, pull every string, pull every favor that I could in order to just get as much money in as I could to try and deal with this and get the IRS off my back. I don't know if you've ever dealt with the IRS, but they're increasingly impossible to actually communicate with. They're not helpful at all whatsoever. And this was when Anna was very helpful during this time, and she became my authorized rep and was able to communicate with the IRS for me, and she was able to communicate in a way that, a normal civilian like you or I is not able to. We were able to get some answers, and essentially by the time that I was finally able to get a hold of them and figure out what the situation was, they said that I had 30 days, and the amount of this balance that really was immediate was about $23,000. So good news and bad news. The good news was that the immediate due amount was not quite $43,000, it was $23,000. So better. The bad news was that I had 30 days to pull all of that cash together and actually pay the IRS that amount. And if I didn't, then they would essentially file a lien against my property. Now, what happened in the days leading up to finally getting some answers to the IRS was they had actually put a lien on my bank account. So my primary checking account was frozen, and anything I had in it was taken, and anything that I would deposit into it from there forward was taken. Luckily, I do have many other bank accounts, and so the solution was just to use different bank accounts and kind of hopscotch from one to the other and just make sure that my funds weren't being taken as soon as I was bringing income in. And it is like an impossible situation, because imagine if you only have, one primary bank that you use, you would be totally screwed. My only option was to just completely hustle my ass off and do everything I could to make as much money as I could. And I was able to pull it off somehow. But it sucked because it really got me off track for the rest of the year, because I had to, follow up with all of my past clients and ask every favor that I could and reach out to everybody that I thought I could close a deal with, essentially, all in like a 30-day time frame. I was scrambling to figure it out. And it's unfortunate because that really used up my bargaining power, if you will, that I had planned on kind of using for the remainder of the year. But I had to do what I had to do in order to make sure that I could keep this roof over my head. This is my headquarters, right? It's not only do I live here, but I mean, just the foundation of my life is under this roof. And there was no way that I could lose this. Everything I had worked for was essentially in this house. A house is replaceable, but there was just no possible way I could let that happen. Now, around this time, my projection of what I thought I would make over the course of 2024, based on what I had done from January through March, was about $200,000 for the year. And even then, I knew that that wasn't going to be enough to really get me to where I wanted to be, especially with the IRS down my back so aggressively. And if you're a business owner, you know how volatile your income can be. One month, your revenue is down, the next month it's up. It can be all over the place. And that's just part of being a business owner and deciding to live a life of entrepreneurship. At that time, around March or April, the good thing was that my recurring revenue was at $7,000 per month. So I knew, for the most part, give or take, that I could count on about $7,000 coming in every month. And that number went up and down all throughout the year. But after finally paying that $23,000 or so to the IRS, all within literally like a 20-day time span, I was tapped out in many ways. You know, it was very difficult to figure out how to even just pay my normal bills, because I took everything I could and pushed it off so that I could pay the IRS. It really set me up for failure, because then I was behind on everything else. You know, I was behind on even just little things, you know, like even my phone bill at one point, as well as like utility bill, power bill, even my mortgage I pushed back a few weeks. It was really just a cascading domino effect that set me up for failure, and it was really hard. So during the end of spring and early summer was the most difficult part of the entire year, because from then forward, I was really playing catch up, and I was just fighting from behind for the remainder of the year after that. The good thing was that because I was able to pay that amount to the IRS, here's the crazy thing, is that doesn't even get them off my back. It just gets me on a payment plan with them. I couldn't be on a payment plan with the IRS unless my total balance was under $50,000, I believe it was. So that $23,000 was the amount that I had to pay just to get under that threshold for them to approve me for a payment plan. And that was the situation. Not only did I have to pay that amount, but then they put me on a payment plan for $900 a month, in addition to all of the bills I was already paying, to just be on a payment plan with the IRS. So it really just put me on the back foot. It was very hard to keep up moving forward, and I knew that my only option from then forward for the rest of the year was just to keep my foot down and work as hard as I could. So I knew that I had at minimum like 9 months of just constant work from then until the holidays, basically. So at this point, you might be wondering, how can I bring in all this income and it just disappears, right? And I was wondering the same thing myself. And a big part of it was that my expenses were so high from the quality of life that I had built leading up to 2024. Even though at the end of 2023, I had done everything I could to try to eliminate wasteful spending, I had fixed my habits, canceled a ton of subscriptions, I stopped going out so much, still my monthly expenses were pretty astronomical. So I was just drowning. In June, around my birthday, which is June 12th, so it's spot on, dead center in summer, right in the middle of the year, my income was at about $80,000. That's what I had brought in so far. It was enough for me to just barely scrape by. Like, this isn't a feeling to complain about because most people live this way. But for me, it was not something I was used to, which is at the end of the month, there was just nothing, you know, just no money left over. And it's a miserable feeling. And it was a cold waking up to reality for myself, because I hadn't lived that way in many years. I spent most of my life that way. But of course, it wasn't that way for the several years leading up to more recently. Now, as I entered July, I knew that that month was going to be rough, and turned out that it was the worst month out of the entire year. It was the lowest amount of income that I was able to bring in. It was $7,000 and something. Total income for July, $7,404.04. It's a pretty tough month at the office. My average monthly income up until now was about $13,000 a month. And this month I barely brought in half of that. And it might as well be nothing compared to my biggest month ever in January of 2022, which was over $111,000 that month. Now, I mentioned at the end of June that I was already expecting a difficult July because I had almost zero income lined up, so this really isn't a surprise at all. The good news is we're hardly a week into August and I've already surpassed July's total income, so I'm definitely pretty stoked about that. At the very least, this experiment has reminded me how unreliable recurring income really is, and how massively challenging it is to scale and sustain your income as an entrepreneur. And even though there's been a lot of difficult moments this year, I've truly enjoyed this process. I've learned quite a bit, and it simultaneously got me in the habit of creating content and documenting in the process. I've reignited my passion for creative work. I've paid off over $45,000 of debt. I've built better processes and systems around my work and my income. I've connected with thousands of new people. I've been more productive than ever. And I know that headed into 2025, I will be the absolute best and most prepared version of myself that there has ever been. So whatever the uncomfortable thing is in your life that you've been avoiding, I can promise you that it is the only thing you should be putting your time and energy into. That again compounded into the rest of the year. Luckily by August, I was able to really pick up a little bit better momentum towards, the final quarter of the year. And in August, at the end of it, I had cracked $100,000. So I cracked 6 figures for the year as far as total gross income that I had brought in. And around August and September, in the back of my mind, I was thinking about the holidays because I've been in business long enough. When the holidays come around, everything starts to slow down. You just get busier, people are busier, nobody's paying attention to their business and your offers and what you're doing. Nobody's opening your newsletter. Things just change, because people's priorities change. You're spending time with family. So I knew that I had to just push as hard as I could for September, October, and November to make sure that I was ready for that. Now, one of the most beautiful things of this entire experience for me personally was that in September, I finally started to get into a creative flow. The hardest part of my year was over, which was dealing with the IRS and getting through summer and really just settling in for the final quarter of the year. And I really did get into a creative flow where I could make content. Did you guys see my cat there? Where I could make content and just kind of open up and be myself and make things and be in a flow to where I enjoyed being behind the computer, working in my office every day, talking to camera, covering topics, answering messages, helping people, writing in the morning and sending out my newsletter. It helped me get over my procrastination. And that was one of the things that I knew doing this would help me accomplish, is just tackling that perfectionist in me. And it took 9 months to just beat that version of myself into submission. I struggle with it every single day. It's part of the creative way of thinking, is you just fall into these perfectionist tendencies and they're so difficult to overcome. And I can easily say it's one of the most difficult things I've had to overcome in my entire life, which is crazy because I've been through some crazy shit. I had a very difficult childhood and young adulthood, but as an adult, it's been the hardest thing to get through. And around September and October was when I finally felt that I had really taken a stab at overcoming that part of me. And it allowed me to create more freely, just speak more openly, not really care about the judgment of what people thought about my situation. I never really cared about it to begin with, but as you start talking about it and you do it, and then you see oh, maybe these videos aren't doing as well, you start to get in your head, you start looking at that result, and you do think about it, and it does bother you. Towards the end of the year, I was able to really just kind of brush that off and not worry about it so much. So as the holidays came up, I was very proud that I just simply stuck to what I said I was going to do. That was the most important thing. I made a promise and I did it regardless of the outcome and regardless of what anybody had to say. That was what I was most proud of. The universe really tested me over the holidays because as December came to a close and I got ready to post my December income recap, I got sick. And I never get sick. I got a cold and I really felt terrible. And if you watch the video, you can tell it's the worst out of all the income recaps that I did. Out of all 12 of them, my health probably just looks the worst because I felt awful. You can tell in the way that I sound that I was sick, but I was I don't care. I'm making the video, being sick and all, runny nose, sore throat, congested. I made the video anyway and I posted it. My total income for December, $14,457.21. Before last year started, I had the wild idea to kind of publicly document my income on social media. That decision is what helped me earn over $145,000, pay off $70,000 worth of debt, and land over $15,000 in brand partnerships for 2024. None of that happened from setting a New Year's resolution or hustling
hustling harder. All of it happened because I made one very specific decision, and that was to tie my progress to a promise that I could not back out of. By publicly making this promise, it held me permanently accountable. No excuses, no sick days, no I'll do it next month. And unfortunately, most people never move forward in any sort of drastic way because they're simply not willing to take risk. I was willing to take the risk. I remember how frustrated I was in 2022 and 2023. I was having a really hard time being consistent. I wasn't motivated by my work anymore, and I felt insanely lost. Now, I don't know if I'll be continuing to publicly share my income, but I do know that this experience has completely changed my life for the better. And now, of course, I have everything that I learned along the way fully documented.
So that gives you an idea of what my journey was throughout the entire year. But to go through the numbers for each month, in January, I brought in $15,067, February, $9,017, March, $17,669, April, another $17,078, May, $8,047, June, $13,436, July, my worst month, at $7,404, August, $10,154, September, $8,798, October, $10,714, November, $8,876, and December, $14,457. There's a small margin of error of dollars and cents for each month, and there's actually about $5,000 in income that is kind of unaccounted for. Once my bookkeeping is fully done, which should be this month, I'll have a better idea of maybe where some of that money came from. But I have multiple bank accounts and multiple sources of income. So to get it down to like the exact dollars and cents is actually quite difficult. But these were the numbers that I pulled together at the end of every month. So that way you have an idea of what was brought in. And the total income for that year was $145,721.99, give or take a few dollars. That gives you an idea of what the entire year looked like for me. And as an entrepreneur, income is very volatile and things can change up and down through every single month, regardless of how much experience you have.
That was that, that brought me through all 12 months. And there's a lot of concepts that I've learned. So up until this point, we've talked about my journey, my story, what I learned through documenting, but I want to go through the actual financial concepts that I learned through this entire journey. They tell you to stop paying your credit cards and to pay them instead. And they say this because they claim, well, by ignoring paying your creditors and paying us, we are then able to collect this money and use it as bargaining and negotiating power when we then contact them on your behalf. It's not true. That is not accurate at all.